Hello everybody, and now we're going to talk about competition and things like monopolies, perfect competition, and everything else. These may be terms you have heard before, but we're going to take a look at the different types of competition that businesses can operate in. So we're going to look at four market models: pure competition, what is demand if you are in pure competition, marginal cost and short-run supply, profit maximization in the long-run supply curves, pure competition and efficiency, and finally, what is the effect of technology. So, the market structure we strive to is what is known as pure competition. And pure competition is a situation where you have many different firms competing against each other and you get the best products for the lowest prices, and this is what is known as an efficient market. Other things that can happen are what is known as imperfect competition, and imperfect competition are times where you may not get the best mix of products or the most efficient or the cheapest or anything like that, and these are situations like a monopoly, monopolistic competition, and what is also known as an oligopoly. So if we look at this slide here, we're going to go through the very few things, the differences here. Pure competition, remember, is a large number of firms. So think of a product that, soda for example, cola. That would be pure competition. There are many, many, many brands, from all of the name brands to all of the store brands to smaller companies. Product's pretty standardized. Regardless of whether you buy Coke or Pepsi or store brand cola or RC Cola, they're all going to be relatively the same. It's a 12-ounce can of a cola flavored soda. They may be a little different here or there, but it's a standardized product. There's really not much control over price because of the sheer number of competitors. Very easy to enter the market. Really no non-price competition. And some other examples here, even better than soda, although you could say that soda is quite competitive. Financial markets, agricultural products, raw materials, these are all things that are pure competition. Many, many firms, the product is standardized, and as a consequence, there's very little to no control over price. The price is set by the markets. Monopolistic competition. So this is things like gas stations or gyms. You could think of a bunch of different brands of gyms. However, there aren't hundreds of them. But there's still many firms. Product is differentiated, so you can, in the gym example, there are cheap gyms like Planet Fitness, better gyms like LA Fitness or NYFC or anything like that. So there's differentiations in the product. There's some control over price, but within rather narrow limits, so you can make your product a little different and price differently. But you can't have a gym that's $500 a month if most of your competitors are 20. You'll go out of business if you do that. Relatively easy to enter the market. And how do the companies in monopolistic competition compete? Well, they compete with things like advertising, brand names, and trademarks. So back to my previous example, soda is straddling the line between pure competition and monopolistic competition because obviously there's a lot of advertising there. A better example of pure competition would be, once again, things like raw materials. Lumber, for instance, that's pure competition. There are thousands of companies that make lumber and it's all very standardized. A 2x4 is a 2x4. In monopolistic competition, back to my gym example, so if you're Planet Fitness, how are you going to get customers above one of your competitors? Well, you're going to advertise. Same thing with gas stations, shoe companies, anything like that. Then it brings us to the oligopoly. Oligopoly, you have few firms, so things like car companies, cell phone companies, power companies, airlines, internet providers. There's very few of them. The product can be standardized or differentiated depending on what it is. Control over price. Well, it depends how these companies cooperate. In a lot of these situations they do. So they may come up with minimum prices or communicate what they're going to price at. It all depends. A lot of obstacles to entry. Very expensive usually to enter a market like this. You're not going to just start up an airline. Whereas it would be pretty easy to start a gym chain in comparison. And non-price competition, well, there's a lot, and they try to differentiate the products. So in cell phone companies, think of all the advertisements, why our network's better, or how we're going to how T-Mobile is going to give a better product than AT&T, for instance. That's a recent commercial being run. Those are all examples there. And then that brings us to a pure monopoly where you generally only have one company. So if you live in a place where there's only one power company, that's a monopoly. Back in the day when Standard Oil was the only oil company in the United States 100 years ago, that was a pure monopoly. Generally, a pure monopoly works because they have a unique product which you can't substitute. So if we're talking about the power company, they're the only people you can get power from. Therefore, it is a unique product. And if you do have a monopoly, you have incredible control over the price. You can really price the product at whatever you want because you have no competition. Conditions of entry, well, if you're a monopoly, you can block anybody else from entering the market. And what are you going to do in terms of advertising? Generally public relations advertising, or monopolies want to keep their monopoly. So they're going to run advertisements of why they're better for society than if it gets deregulated or something like that. So patented pharmaceutical drugs, local utilities, these are examples of monopolies. Monopolies are heavily regulated in today's world, and a lot of times monopolies may get broken up by the government. So in pure competition, you have a lot of sellers, products standardized, so think lumber, for instance, plywood at Home Depot, sheet of plywood's a sheet of plywood. You have a lot of different people selling it. And we consider sellers to be price takers, meaning they have no pricing power. They have to price their product whatever the market deems fit. They can't just name their own price. And you really have easy entry and exit when there's pure competition. There's really no barriers to entry. Pure competition has perfectly elastic demand, so a firm will produce as much or as little as they wish at the market price, and the demand graphs is a horizontal line. So in this case, perfectly elastic demand means the firm has no power to influence price, so they'll just produce however much they want at the given price. And here is an example of your demand and your revenue curves. So the graph here is going to show the price, and the price is $131, and that's at all quantities demanded, so we can calculate total revenue and marginal revenue depending on how much this firm makes. And once again, they have no power to set the price, so it's just going to be at $131. Because each additional unit increases total revenue by the amount of the price, total revenue is a straight upsloping line, and the marginal revenue curve coincides with the firm's demand curve. Demand and marginal revenue are equal to the exact same thing, and the average revenue curve is the same thing as well. That's why the green line says D equals MR and equals AR. Total revenue will just keep going up by the price. So since that firm cannot set the price, they will just make however much they see fit. So in this case, what is average revenue? Average revenue is total revenue divided by quantity. And in this case, it would equal the price. Total revenue is price times quantity, and marginal revenue is the additional revenue from one more unit, or in this case of pure competition, the price once again. Marginal revenue is the change in total revenue over the change in quantity. So a competitive producer will wish to produce at the output level where total revenue exceeds total cost by the greatest amount. And let's take a look here. A term you may have heard before, have you taken an accounting or management class, is your break-even point. And in any form of business, economics, etc., your break-even point is the point where total revenue equals total cost. So if we look here, we have total fixed cost, total variable cost, and total cost, as well as total revenue. So total revenue, as you note, and I'll get the highlighter out right here, total revenue is going up as we sell one more each time by $131, or the price, because we're dealing with perfect competition. Now we also have our other information. We have our fixed costs, and remember, fixed costs don't change no matter how much we make of something. It's $100. Variable costs do go up the more we make. So as we watch, the total cost is just fixed and variable added, and it's going up the more we make. Total revenue is simply going to be the price of $131 times the quantity. So as we look here, we can look at our profit or loss. Our profit or loss is just simply total revenue minus total cost. So we are losing money up until making 3. Making from 0 to 2, we are losing money. Now from 3 to more, we're becoming more and more profitable. When we hit 9 output, we're making $2.99, and by the time we hit 10, we're back down to $2.80. So remember, back to earlier chapters, you don't just simply have the ability to keep making more of something and expect to make more and more money. Eventually costs will continue to grow. You do have variable costs, and as a consequence, you may hit a point where it is no longer in your interest to increase production anymore. And that's exactly what we're looking at here. So up until up until quantity 9 or profit of $2.99, this is where we would want to produce up to. When we increase quantity to 10, we're actually making less money. And that is what is charted out right here. And the way to read this chart on the left, where the distance between the total cost and the total revenue line is greatest, that is our maximum profit. And sure enough, that is at quantity 9, $299. The lines come closer and closer together, and eventually if we keep making more, we'll hit a point where we once again hit our break-even point again. If you make too much of something, you actually can lose money. And that's the graph on the right showing this. Total economic profit is going to increase, hit its maximum point here of $299, and then taper back off. So using marginal revenue equals marginal cost rule, for a price taker, price is equal to your marginal revenue. So remember, in perfect competition, your marginal revenue or change in revenue is simply the price of this product. If each quantity we increase, that's our marginal revenue or change in revenue. So should the firm produce? If so, what amount and what profit will be realized? So whether or not the firm should produce at all in the short run. In the short run, the firm should shut down under certain circumstances. If the firm can produce in the short run, they must determine how much to produce, or that point where profit's maximized. It's necessary to calculate the profit or loss for the firm, and we recognize that part of the profit maximization rule is producing an output that minimizes losses in the short run when that's the best option. So there may be a situation in the short run where no matter what we do, we may not make money. That can happen. It's not what you want to happen, but it's possible. You may have a situation where even if you make 0, you still have fixed costs. You're going to lose money no matter what you do. So in that case, you're going to minimize the loss. You're going to select the option that gives you the lowest possible loss, because if you can't make money, what's the next best thing you can do? Minimize the amount you lose. So in that case, you may produce even though you're losing, because it may be better off than not producing at all. Remember, fixed costs and all of the things, we pay bills on our factories and we have to pay our salaries. Those are all our fixed costs. They don't just go away if we shut our plant down. So it may be more beneficial to keep the plant open and lose a small amount of money than keep it shut and lose a large amount of money. And this is something that real businesses grapple with all the time. So if we look here, once again, 9 is still the winner here. So in these numbers right here, here's our costs, average fixed costs, average variable costs. So now we're looking in terms of averages. Marginal cost, our price, and finally total profit. And once again, using the averages, it's still 9 here. These numbers are the same. So our fixed cost decreases the more we make of something. Variable costs, it all depends on how much we're making. So average total cost is just simply average fixed plus average variable. Marginal cost is the change. Marginal revenue is also the change. That's the change in cost and the change in revenue. And here is our total profit or loss here. Here's our total profit or loss here. So the firm should continue to expand output as long as marginal revenue, right here, is greater than marginal cost, right here. So at 9, it's very close, but revenue is still greater than cost, meaning the additional revenue is greater than the additional cost. By the time we hit, and I'll switch to red here, by the time we hit 10 units, marginal revenue is now less than marginal cost. So we're going to produce, if we're looking at marginal cost and marginal revenue, up to the point where marginal revenue is greater than marginal cost, even if only by a little bit. And that, once again, is quantity number 9, right here, same as before, our maximum profit. So this graph shows short-run profit maximization for pure competition. Marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Output enables the firm to maximize profits or minimize losses. In this case, marginal revenue, or price, considering it's pure competition, our marginal revenue is equal to our price, and marginal cost are equal at an output of 9 units. It was actually within 1. Price is 131 and exceeds the average total cost of 97.78, and the firm would realize a profit of price minus average cost per unit, or $2.99. If you subtract 97.78 from 131 and multiply it by the 9 units, you'll get your total cost. So what we're looking at here, once again, up to the point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost will produce, it's actually, remember, 1 away. Marginal revenue is 1 greater than marginal cost with these numbers. And anything beyond that, we wouldn't produce up to this point. So if you're in a situation where you're going to lose no matter what you do, you have to choose the option that is the least painful loss. Now, businesses make decisions like this all the time. It's not ideal, but sometimes you run into a situation where you are going to lose money no matter what you do. So in the short run, you have 2 choices. Keep your factories open and produce, or shut down, and there's not enough time to go out of business in the short run. So given these options, a lot of times you're going to produce but still make a loss, the loss from producing being better than if we shut down. So we'll still produce because marginal revenue, is greater than minimum average variable cost, and losses are at a minimum when marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And producing adds more to revenue than to costs. So if we shut down, we are responsible for all of our fixed costs, and they might be very large. Whereas if we start producing, even though our costs are going to go up, we have variable ones as well, we might lose a lot less than if we stay shut down. And that's exactly what we're going to look at here. So in this case, our price here is equal to $71. Our fixed cost is $100. Average variable cost change. So if we look at our average total costs, marginal costs and marginal revenue, and total economic profit or loss, let's take a look here. So the firm should continue to expand output as long as marginal revenue is greater than marginal cost, meaning each additional unit of revenue is more than each additional unit of cost. So we're actually making our loss go down. So the firm will minimize losses by producing the last unit of output where marginal revenue still exceeds marginal cost up until when they equal each other. Since the 7th unit's marginal cost is greater than marginal revenue, so at the 7th unit, marginal cost is equal to 90, marginal revenue 81, we would produce up to the 6th where marginal cost is equal to 80 and marginal revenue is equal to 81. So in that case, it's going to be the best possible scenario. So total economic profit or loss, well, total economic profit or loss here is going to be a loss of $64. That is the best option we can do. That's our loss minimizing case. So that's our best option we can do. That would once again be our loss minimizing case. Whereas if we shut down and make nothing, we're going to lose $100. We're going to lose our fixed cost. So no matter what we do here, we're going to lose. But if we make 6 units, we're only going to lose $64, whereas if we completely shut down or make less than 6, we're going to lose more in each case. So in this case, it's the best of a bad situation. You're choosing to lose the least possible amount of money. Now, once again, this is only for the short term. No firm is going to stay in business indefinitely losing money. But in the short term, remember, you cannot make decisions right away to go out of business or wind down. So you have to choose the best possible option and then see where is the market going forwards. So if we look here, there is this graph. So at 6 here, we're going to run into a situation. If price or P exceeds the minimum average cost, so minimum average variable cost is $74, let's say at quantity 5, but less than average total cost at 6, the firm's going to incur losses but will produce. Your loss here is price minus average cost per unit. And the total loss is shown by the red area and is equal to, and here's your red area right here, price minus average total cost times 6. That is your best scenario though. That's the case where the lines come the closest to each other and you're minimizing your loss. Once your marginal cost starts exceeding your marginal revenue, you're going to stop producing. And here's a case for a shutdown. So if we look here, price is $71. Marginal revenue equals marginal cost yields an output level of 5. If price here is equal to $71, falls below the minimum average variable cost, which is 74 at quantity 5. The firm would minimize its losses by shutting down. There's no level of output at which the firm can produce and incur a loss smaller than its total fixed cost. So in other words, the $100 fixed cost would be the minimum possible loss. So if we look here, this would be a case to shut down. So marginal revenue equals marginal cost at an output level of 5. And that's quantity 5. And the firm here would shut down because this is going to be the minimum possible loss, just eating your fixed cost, just eating your fixed cost. So as long as price exceeds minimum average variable cost, the firm will continue to produce using the rule of marginal revenue or price is equal to marginal costs, and your supply graph is an upsloping line. So if we look here, this is a relationship between price and quantity supplied. Since price is equal to marginal revenue for the competitive firm, your rule of marginal revenue equal marginal cost will yield your short-run supply curve. And the supply curve is part of the marginal cost that lies above the average variable cost curve. Schedule shows the quantity a firm will produce at a variety of prices. So depending on what the price is, it's going to change the amount of products this company supplies the market with. These are the same numbers we used before. Remember, at $131, 9 was our best example. If the price of this product went up to $151, we would supply 10. If it went down to $111, we would supply 8. $91, we would supply 7 and have a slight loss. 81, like we just looked at, we would supply 6 and have a loss of 64. And if the price goes under 81, we would shut down. The reason being, if the price went under $81, if it went to 71 or 61, no matter how much we make, we're going to lose more than simply shutting the factory and eating our fixed cost of $100. So there are situations where you would shut down, because sometimes eating your fixed cost is better than any possible amount you can make, because any other amount you make, you're going to lose more. Companies operate rationally. They're going to minimize losses. They are not going to operate if they're going to lose more than by being shut down. So what we're looking at here is the quantity a firm will produce at a variety of prices. Firms continue to follow the maximizing rule and will produce where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, and they'll produce as long as the price is greater than the minimum average variable cost. So as marginal revenue is changing, as price changes, it's going to change how much we're going to supply. So marginal cost curve is the blue line, and marginal revenue is changing in each case. So remember, where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, that's where we're going to supply. So as revenue goes up, quantity is going to go up as well. So in this case, quantity is going to be a lot more than in this case right here. All depending on what the price is. So your marginal cost becomes your short-run supply curve. If your price is below average variable cost, or the yellow line, your firm should shut down and produce 0. If the price is equal to or above average variable cost, we should produce, but remember, we might still lose. As long as our price is above your average variable cost, it means as we make more, we're reducing our costs. We're actually going to be reducing that loss. But it doesn't necessarily mean we'll make a profit. Your marginal cost curve is going to be the marginal cost curve that is above average variable cost becomes your short run supply curve. And your break-even point is point D in this case, where the firm earns a normal profit because price equals average total cost here. When our price is equal to our average total cost, it means that they're offsetting each other. We're breaking even, and that's going to be right here at point D. And I'm going to switch to red here. And now if we trace this line up from here up to here, that is our short run supply curve. The reason being, anywhere below that, if our price is below our average variable costs, we would shut down immediately. We would not make anything because it would be cheaper just to eat our fixed costs. Otherwise, we'd be eating our fixed costs and losing more on every single unit. That's the difference. Whereas if we're still losing money, let's say at point C, it's offsetting some of our fixed cost. That's the difference. So should a firm produce? Yes, if the price is equal to or greater than minimum average variable costs. This means that the firm is profitable or that its losses are less than fixed costs. And that's exactly what we just looked at. What quantity should it produce? Produce where marginal revenue equals marginal costs. That'll maximize profit. Total revenue exceeds total cost by a maximum amount, or loss is minimized. So you're not always going to make money, but minimizing a loss is better than nothing. Will it result in profit? Well, yes, if price exceeds average total cost. That would mean your overall revenue would exceed overall costs. No, if average total cost exceeds price. So that total cost exceeds revenue. So in this case, once again, as long as your total revenue is exceeding total cost or price is greater than your average total cost, you're going to make something. If not, you're going to lose. So if we look here, if our product is priced at $111 for instance, or $131 or $151, let's take a look. Equilibrium price in a market is where everything being supplied is being demanded. That's what we mean by market equilibrium. Market equilibrium is when everything that is supplied is being demanded. So if we look here, equilibrium would take place at 8,000 quantity or a price of 111. So market equilibrium is where quantity demanded equals quantity supplied, in this case $111, and this is known as the market clearing price, meaning in theory everything being supplied to the market is going to be purchased. And the industry demand curve is your typical downward sloping demand, even though for the individual firm it's perfectly elastic and horizontal. So each firm, or our firm here, is going to supply 8. The total market from 1,000 firms would be 8,000 at a price of $111. At higher prices, firms will be more likely to produce. Quantity is going to go up, but demand is going to go down, and you wind up in a situation with a surplus. You'll have too much that no one's buying. At cheaper prices, demand's going to go up. However, firms aren't going to really want to supply, or they might not supply anything, even though there's all this demand. Companies aren't going to supply something even if there's a lot of demand, if they're going to lose money. So short run competitive equilibrium, well, it would look like this. So the single firm is on the left. That is going to be this one right here. That's your single firm at $8. Marginal cost is greater than average total cost. So this firm is making a profit. That's that green box right here. That's just the distance between average total cost and marginal cost. They are making money. And here is the industry right here, intersection of all supply and all demand, $111. Remember, in macroeconomics, where supply and demand for the market crosses, that is market equilibrium. Your economic profit is that green box, or the distance between average total cost and marginal cost. So what about firms versus the industry? The fallacy of competition, it's a logical pitfall that gets made when one assumes what is true for an individual is true of a group, and this is not necessarily true. We can look at 3 examples. The first is that it's true an atom is not alive, but it would be false to assume that nothing made up of atoms is alive. You and I are made up of trillions, quadrillions of atoms, and we are alive, but atoms themselves are not. People are made from atoms and are very much alive. In our second example, picture yourself at a sporting event. If you stand up, you may get a better view, but if everyone stands up, your view would be the same as if everyone was seated. Same applies with stocks. If you or I sell shares, the price might not change, but if everybody sells, the price is going to plunge. So what happens to the overall group can be different than what happens to the individual. So pure competition in the long run, firms will have to make a decision. Are they going to enter or exit an industry? Are they going to expand or shrink? So in the long run, everything can change. In the short run, you can't just snap your fingers and go out of business or double your capacity or anything like that. But in the long run, you can. And these decisions are made by profits and losses. If you know no matter what you do, you're going to continue losing money staying in this industry, you're going to exit it. And companies do that all the time. They shut down divisions or transform what they're doing. You're not going to continue making a product that is going to lose you money no matter what you do. If you see yourself making large profits, you're going to expand your ability to make more of a product. So easy entry and exit is the only long-run adjustment we consider in this analysis. And when we are looking at pure competition, we say all firms in the industry have identical costs because they're making identical products. And economics work better a lot of times on paper than in practice because we have to make all sorts of assumptions like this. However, it's an assumption you can make if it's pure competition because each firm should have a broadly similar experience. And another assumption we make is what's known as the constant cost industry, whereas entry and exits of firms does not affect resource prices. Since there are so many firms, if one enters or exits, it really shouldn't change the price of resources. So what about long-run equilibrium? Profits attract firms from less profitable industries and losses cause them to leave, to find a different one. And this reflects a determinant of supply, namely how many sellers do we have. So if a lot of people start entering it's going to eliminate profits. You'll get more supply, price is going to come down. This is a rule. So if hundreds of new firms enter a market because they see it being lucrative, it's going to increase supply and bring down prices. Great for consumers, not necessarily great for firms. If firms leave because a lot of them are losing money, by rule supply is going to decrease and price is going to rise. Less good for consumers, but good for the firms that stay in the market. So in pure competition, firms seek profits and shun losses. Companies we expect to operate rationally. Firms are free to enter or exit at will. Production will occur at a firm's minimum average total cost, and price will equal minimum average total cost. So if we look here, this is going to show temporary profits and reestablishment of long-run equilibrium in a firm and an industry. So if we look at a single firm here, a favorable shift in demand from D1 to D2 will upset the original industry and produce profits. As a result, those profits are going to entice new firms to enter the industry and increase supply from S1 to S2, lowering the price until economic profits are once again zero. In other words, an increase in demand temporarily raises price, higher prices draw on new competitors, increased supply returns price to equilibrium. So that's what's going to happen here. That's what's going to happen here. The market will re-find equilibrium. There'll be more demand, more supply, prices will come back down. We could do the same thing from the loss side of the coin here. So temporary losses in the reestablishment of equilibrium, so a decrease in demand. And remember, external factors can change demand. In the first example where it was going up, let's say we were looking during COVID and it was the demand for things like hand sanitizer. Then thousands of new people entered the market, price came back down. Then COVID emergency ends, people really aren't buying very much hand sanitizer. Now we're looking at this right here where demand pulls in and a decrease in demand will drop the price, and a lot of competitors now will probably stop making hand sanitizer. It's no longer in their interest to do so, and the decrease in supply returns price to equilibrium. Remember when people were trying to get $10 a bottle for hand sanitizer, $20 a bottle for hand sanitizer, and now back to normal, you can go to Bed Bath & Body Works or something like that and get 5 of them for $5 or anything like that. So, as a consequence, we see stuff like this all the time where changes in demand bring in temporary profits, temporary losses, but the market will, again, find equilibrium. So long-run supply curves. So a constant cost industry. Entry or exit does not affect a long-run average total cost. Constant resource prices. That's what we were just looking at. In the second scenario, entry or exits of firms does affect cost. Input costs will increase as firms enter the industry, and input costs will fall as firms exit. And that would give us an upsloping long-run supply curve. In a decreasing cost industry, as the number of firms increase or decrease due to entry or exit, costs change inversely. If demand for their product falls, firms will leave the industry, causing input costs to rise. If demand for product increases, firms will enter, causing input costs to fall, and your long-run supply curve is downsloping. Examples include things like the computer industry and shoe manufacturers in America. Computers were very, very expensive many years ago. In the 1980s, computers cost $3,000–4,000 in 1980s money. Tens of thousands of dollars in today, over $10,000 in today's money. Now you could get a top-of-the-line computer for a good measure less than $3,000 in today's money, and it can do orders of magnitude more things than a computer from the 80s. Why did this happen? Demand, obviously, for computers went up from the 80s into the 90s into the 2000s, and many, many companies entered the industry. Input costs fell, and that's exactly what we saw. So a constant cost industry would look like this. In a constant cost industry, entry and exit to firms does not affect resource prices and does not affect per unit costs. So increasing demand, it is going to raise output, but not the actual price of the product. This was what our pure competition example we started off looking at was. So a decrease in demand reduces output but not the price. So your long run curve is horizontal. So this is pure competition with a fixed price here. No matter what we do, we can vary quantity, but price is not going to change. And depending on demand, that's what we're going to do. We're going to vary quantity. In an increasing cost industry, you have an up-sloping long run supply curve. So let's take a look at that. Entry of new firms in response to an increase in demand, so demand's going from 3 to 1 to 2, will bid up resource prices and increase unit costs. So an increased industry output will be forthcoming only at higher prices. So since costs go up the more we make, price is going to have to go up to find equilibrium. So 90,000, price of 45, 100,000, price of 50, 110,000, price of 55. So price is changing depending on how much we make. The more we make, price is going up here. Decreasing cost industry, or what we just talked about with computers or a lot of other things, this is going to be the opposite. So at quantity 90, price 55, quantity 100,000, price is 50, and at quantity 110,000, price 45. So as quantity is going up, costs are actually going down. So think of once computers got very popular and how they got much cheaper the more they caught on. Cell phones as well, smartphones and everything like that, once they were originally a curiosity and then more and more of them came out. So you have a downward sloping supply curve. More supply, less price. So in long run equilibrium, to have productive efficiency, where we're making goods and services in the most efficient manner, price must equal minimum average total cost. Condition for allocative efficiency is that price equals marginal costs. Pure competition achieves both in its long-run equilibrium. If you get long-run equilibrium, it means firms are using the most efficient technology, charging the lowest price, and making the greatest output consistent to its cost. And the firm is using scarce resources in accordance with consumer preferences. And your consumer surplus, the green, and producer surplus, blue, where the benefits to both is maximized. So equilibrium is where we want to be. Marginal cost equaling marginal revenue. So price is equal to marginal cost, minimum average total cost. And that's right here. Maximizing producer and consumer surpluses. So same logic as in macro, only in micro here we're looking at what it does to the individual firm, whereas in macro the graph on the right was the only one we really looked at with producer and consumer surpluses. So in the long run, efficiency is achieved. Productive efficiency is producing where price is equal to minimum average total cost, meaning we're making things in the most efficient way. Allocative efficiency is producing where price is equal to marginal cost, and what we want is price to equal marginal cost to equal minimum average total cost. That will maximize consumer and producer surplus. Productive efficiency means that we're making something as efficiently as possible. Allocative efficiency means we're using our resources in a way that's most demanded by our consumers. So what are some adjustments? Purely competitive markets will automatically adjust to things like changes in consumer tastes, resources, technology, and that invisible hand. The invisible hand, remember, is that markets are efficient, self-correcting, and guide themselves along. So we get automatic adjustments due to these things. Disequilibrium will cause expansion or contraction of the industry until we find a new equilibrium where price is equal to marginal cost. The invisible hand works in a competitive market system since no explicit orders are given to the industry to achieve price equaling marginal cost. Profit motivation brings about highly desirable economic outcomes. So since we're motivated by profits, the markets are self-correcting, we're going to wind up in the best possible situation regardless of external changes. So what about technological advance? Entrepreneurs would like to increase profits beyond the normal profit. So why do we create new technologies? To generally decrease cost. We invent a new way to run our business, or a new computer system where we can replace a lot of employees, or new robots to make cars half as in half the amount of time. Those are all examples of using technology to decrease costs. We also use technology to develop new products. So innovation means using better technology or improved business organization. New product development means the firm will be first to market with a new product, but others will soon follow and then destroy the innovating firm's position. So generally you get a good boost once you invent something. If you were the first to invent a smartphone or a computer operating system or something, obviously it's going to benefit you. But then what happens? Given enough time, companies will all start doing the same thing. Think of all of the number of brands of smartphones that exist now. Obviously, there's more than one. So once others follow, they're going to destroy your position. That's called a first mover advantage. You're the first person to invent something. It's very powerful, but eventually your competitors will start imitating you. Competition and innovation may lead to creative destruction. This is a very important point, and this is something that you'll learn immediately if you ever take a management theory class. The creation of new products and methods may destroy old ones, and that is a healthy thing. Competition is a healthy thing. Invention is a healthy thing. If it wasn't for creative destruction, we would have never gotten rid of VCRs and cassette tapes, and there wouldn't be digital formats. That's an example of creative destruction. Or flip phones giving way to smartphones. That's an example of creative destruction. And if we look at our last slide, what happened with the COVID pandemic, it led to a massive decline in revenue for many businesses, restaurants, hotels, rental cars. This has since balanced out, but at least for a few years they were way down. Some hotels went bankrupt and had to open under new ownership. Rental car companies sold off lots of their fleets to raise cash and didn't go bankrupt, but then they wound up in a situation where the demand came back. But remember that you may have traveled with your family or something like that. It was very hard to get a rental car once things originally started opening up again after COVID. Because of this, they sold off so much of their fleet. The demand came back, there was no supply. So what did they do? They had to run and buy cars again. So in that case, this is an example of, once again, markets correcting to a new circumstance and then correcting again once that circumstance started easing up. And this is something we saw quite a bit during the pandemic. A bit longer of a chapter, but all very important information, and that's going to take us to the end of chapter number 10.